Today, I'm showing you why 62 is the most important age for your entire retirement, and why turning 62 isn't a milestone, it's a deadline. What if I told you that almost every financial mistake people make in their 70s and 80s was actually planted in a single 12-month window they didn't even realize they were sitting in? Through working with clients at this exact pivot point, I've discovered something unsettling. 62 is the first year 3 different clocks all start running on the same day, and the answers you give in these 12 months get hard-coded into the next 30 years of your life. That's exactly why I'm making this video today. Not to tell you what 62 means, to show you what you can do at 62 that becomes dramatically harder at 63, 65, and beyond. So you can design your retirement instead of reacting to it. Let's get right into it. Most people think the big retirement milestones are 59 and a half, 65, 67, or maybe even 73. Those ages get all the attention. Why? Because something obvious happens. Penalty disappears. A benefit becomes available. A requirement kicks in. But 62 is different, and if you don't see why, you'll miss the most expensive year of your life. Here's the part nobody warns you about. 62 is the first age where 3 completely separate clocks all start running on the same day. 3 clocks. And every clock has its own kind of damage if you ignore it. The first is the claiming clock because Social Security eligibility opens. The second is the withdrawal clock because the 10% early withdrawal penalty disappears, and every dollar you take from a 401k or IRA is suddenly a real lifestyle decision instead of a forced one. And the third clock, the one almost nobody talks about, the one that quietly destroys more retirements than any other, is called the fragile decade. Now think of your retirement portfolio like a sandcastle being built right at the edge of the tide. The first 5 years are the wet, fragile foundation. The first 5 years of your retirement quietly determine roughly 80% of the probability that you don't run out of money at 90. Stay with me because this is the part that surprises people. A 25% market drop at 62 has roughly 4 times the long-term damage of the exact same drop at 75. Why? Because at 62 you're selling shares to live on while they're cheap, and you never give them a chance to grow back. The retirees who understand what 62 actually represents treat this year like the most expensive piece of real estate they own. The ones who don't, they spend the next 30 years trying to fix problems that were preventable in 12 months. So why do most people miss the window? Because 62 doesn't feel risky. Feels ready. You're eligible to claim. You can touch your accounts without penalty. You're allowed to slow down. But feeling ready and being structured are not the same thing. A pilot can feel ready to land without ever lowering the landing gear. And in retirement planning, that difference, it's everything. Now let me show you what changes at 63 that makes 62 your last clean year. What happens if you turn 63 having already pulled the Social Security trigger? And you're still doing any kind of work, even a little side consulting, even a quiet small business on the side? Most people assume nothing happens. They are wrong. At 63, the earnings test kicks in, and now here's where it gets technical. But stay with me because this is the part that surprises people. The earnings test withholds $1 of Social Security for every $2 you earn over a threshold. Around $22,320 a year in recent figures. Most people hear withhold and assume that money is gone forever. It's not. The Social Security Administration credits it back to you after full retirement age. Like the IRS putting your check in escrow and handing it back later in slightly bigger pieces. Sounds harmless, right? It's not. Here's the catch nobody tells you. You still feel the cash flow hit for 3 to 5 years, right when your spending is highest. Because you're traveling, helping kids with weddings, paying off the last of the mortgage. Suddenly the check you budgeted on, it shrinks. And to fill the gap, you pull more from the IRA, which compounds the sequence of returns problem we just talked about. One bad decision feeding another. Now here's the part that gets even more technical. And this is where most retirement blogs lie to you by accident. When you claim and keep working, the SSA also recalculates your benefit each year based on your highest 35 earning years. Most blogs tell you this is automatically a win. It's not. Think of it like swapping items in a backpack. If your part-time consulting income at 63 is lower than the year it would have replaced in your top 35, the recalculation actually drags your benefit down. So claim and work isn't free. It's a trade-off most people accept blindly because nobody told them they were trading. And here's the part that makes 62 a deadline, not a suggestion. Retroactive claiming only goes back 6 months. 6 months. So if you're sitting at 62 thinking, let me see how the year goes before I decide, you don't have a flexible window. You have 12 months. Not 3 years. Not 5. 12. The simplicity of being uncommitted at 62, where every claiming path is still wide open, that disappears the moment you turn 63. So 62 brings the claiming decision into the room for real. But 65, that's where the bridge collapses. Literally. Most people think Medicare at 65 is automatic and free, and that the gap between leaving a job at 62 and Medicare at 65 is something Cobra quietly handles in the background. That single assumption costs people more money than almost any other miss in this entire video. Picture a couple trying to walk across a canyon on a bridge that's 18 months too short, with nothing underneath but air. That's what the Cobra to Medicare gap actually looks like for most early retirees, and almost nobody sees it coming. Cobra only runs 18 months. So if you separate from your employer at 62, your Cobra window closes at 63 and a half, leaving you with roughly 18 months of no man's land before Medicare picks you up at 65. And here's a common catch that gets people. You can't just go on your spouse's plan if your spouse is already retired. You can't just wait it out without coverage, because one cardiac event in those 18 months can wipe out a quarter of your portfolio. And you can't easily jump onto an ACA marketplace plan after open enrollment without a qualifying life event. 3 doors that all look open from the outside. 3 doors that close at different speeds while you're staring at them. So what does this mean at 62? You have exactly 36 months to lock in a bridge plan, and you have to choose between 3 options that each have their own pricing, network, and deductible logic. There's Cobra followed by ACA. There's going straight to ACA at 62. And there's enrolling in a spousal employer plan if your partner is still working. Each window narrows every quarter you wait. At 62, all 3 are open. By 64, 2 are usually closed. And these aren't small numbers. The average uncovered or underinsured healthcare gap for a couple between 62 and 65 runs between $31,000 and $48,000 if no plan is built. That's not tax. That's not penalty. That's cash, straight out of the bucket you were planning to live on for 30 years. The retirees who map this out at 62 essentially get those 3 years of healthcare for far less than full freight, because they structure income to qualify for marketplace assistance or time their retirement to align with retiree health benefits. The ones who don't, they pay full price, and they pay it during the exact window when their portfolio is most fragile. So now you've seen the cost of doing nothing. Let me show you what doing something actually looks like. If you knew you had a single year where 4 vault doors were all open at the same time, and after that year each door would close on its own schedule, what would you do with that year? That's exactly what 62 is. You can layer 4 major moves at once. And 62 is genuinely the only year all 4 windows are wide open at the same time. Let's start with what most couples never even model: spousal coordination. At 62, you and your spouse have at least 4 distinct claiming paths. One of you claims now while the other delays, both delay together. You stagger by 2 or 3 years to optimize the survivor benefit. Or, in narrower cases for those born before 1954, you use a restricted application to claim spousal first while your own grows. Each path produces a different lifetime payout. The gap between the best path and the worst path for an average couple? Somewhere around $180,000 to $260,000 over a 30-year horizon. That's a paid-off house. After 62, every month that passes closes off another permutation. Now here's a question almost nobody asks. Which bucket should you tap first? Taxable brokerage? Tax-deferred IRA? Tax-free Roth? Most people grab whichever is easiest, and that decision quietly poisons the next 30 years. 62 is the only year you still have full flexibility to set what I call your tax topology. Think of it like the plumbing in your house. Build it right once and water flows where you want it for decades. Build it wrong, and you're patching leaks every winter. Tap the wrong bucket first and your IRA balloons in the background, until forced distributions at 73 or 75 push you into brackets you never planned to live in. Tap the right bucket first, and you stay in the driver's seat the whole way through. Now here's a window most people don't even know is closing. Long-term care insurance. Roughly 90% of LTC carriers stop underwriting new policies after age 65. Premiums at 62 versus 65 run about 38% lower for the same coverage. And underwriting at 62 clears about 80% of applicants in clean health versus closer to 50% at 64. The window doesn't close gently. It slams. I've watched a healthy 64-year-old skip the medical exam because I feel fine. And at 67, not a single carrier in the country would write the policy. That's a door that doesn't reopen. There's one more move, and it might be the most important. The sequence of returns buffer. At 62, you still have enough runway to build a 24-month cash bucket. Somewhere between $120,000 and $180,000 for a typical couple. Why does that matter? Because it lets you avoid selling stocks during a downturn in your first 5 retirement years. Without that buffer, a 30% crash in year 1 of retirement can permanently shorten your portfolio runway by 8 years or more. 8 years. With the buffer, you ride the crash out and keep the long-term math intact. Think of it as a moat around the castle. Trying to layer all 4 moves at 64 or 65 means sprinting through doors that are already half shut. So 62 lets you set up 4 guardrails at once. Now let me show you what you're really setting up for the next 30 years. Here's a question that should keep every married 62-year-old up at night. What happens to your spouse if you make the wrong claiming move and you go first? Most calculators don't model it. Most advisors don't ask it. The decisions you make at 62 don't just affect next year. They lock in math that carries you across 3 decades. Here's how to think about it. The classic Social Security break-even age. Comparing claim at 62 to claim at full retirement age. Land somewhere between 78 and 79, depending on cost of living adjustments. Compare claim at 62 to delaying to 70, and the break-even is around 80 to 82. Most calculators stop there. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. Those break-even numbers assume you're a single person living and dying alone. For a married couple, the survivor benefit changes the entire calculation, often pushing the real break-even 4 to 6 years further out. Why? Because when one spouse dies, the higher of the two benefits is what continues, not both. So if a high-earning spouse claims early at 62, the locked-in benefit becomes the lid on what the surviving spouse can ever receive, even if that spouse lives another 23 years past that point. And this is the part that keeps people up at night once they understand it. You can't fix this later. Once a benefit is claimed and locked, the survivor benefit is mathematically capped at that level forever. Think of it like pouring concrete. Once it sets, you can't reshape it. You can only build around it. At 62, you still have a window to model both spouses' life expectancy, earnings histories, and health profiles, and pick a sequence that protects whichever one is statistically likely to live longer. By 65, several of those levers are gone. There's a third piece beyond break-even and survivor lock-in, and it's the one that doesn't show up on any calculator. Your psychological income floor, the number you choose to live on in year 1 of retirement, quietly becomes the baseline your brain anchors to for the next 30 years. It's like a thermostat you set once and never look at again. Set it too high, and you can't scale back when markets turn ugly because lifestyle compression starts feeling like failure. Set it too low, and you quietly underspend your whole retirement, ending up frustrated at 78. Looking at a portfolio you built but never enjoyed, while forced distributions push the money out anyway and tax it on the way. 62 is the year you set that floor with intention, not by accident. After 62, the floor calcifies on its own, and you live the rest of your life inside whatever number you defaulted to. So now you've seen the system 62 sets in motion. Let me show you what happens when someone treats it like just another birthday. So what actually goes wrong when 62 gets treated like a regular year? 3 patterns repeat themselves, and none of them are pretty. Picture this. A couple skips the sequence risk buffer because the market is calm and the portfolio looks healthy. Year 2 of retirement hits a bear market. The broad index drops 28%. To keep up with the mortgage and the RV payment, they sell equities at the bottom. The portfolio never recovers the way the spreadsheet promised, because the math of withdrawing during a drawdown is brutal. By 78, they're back to looking at part-time work in their 70s. Not because they spent recklessly, because they sold low for 2 years straight. Now picture this one. The higher-earning spouse claims at 62, telling everyone, "I want to take it before the government runs out," without modeling what happens to the surviving spouse. 9 years later, the higher earner passes unexpectedly. The surviving spouse, often a widow living another 23 years, is locked into a survivor benefit roughly 30% below what was mathematically achievable. 23 years times that gap is real money, and it's irreversible. There's a third pattern, and it's the one that doesn't show up on any spreadsheet. The one that quietly hurts the most. The shift from earner to spender is not a financial transition. It's an identity transition. For 40 years, you got paid to solve problems. You woke up, somebody handed you something hard, you handled it, and you got rewarded for it. Now suddenly, you're handed a portfolio, a calendar with no obligations and one instruction. Don't run out. The retirees who design at 62 know exactly what they're spending, why, and from which bucket. They feel like they're playing offense even when markets are rough, because every decision was pre-modeled and intentional. The retirees who don't, they spend the next 30 years quietly playing defense. They're rich on paper but poor in feeling. They second-guess every dinner out, every vacation, every gift to a grandchild, because they never built the structural confidence to know which dollar comes from where. They have the money, they just never gave themselves permission to use it because no one ever showed them the framework. 62 is the last year you can build that framework before the system starts building one for you. And the system's framework is rarely the one you would have chosen. 62 is your last chance to design your retirement before the system starts designing it for you. So now you've seen why 62 is the most important age for your entire retirement. Sequence of returns risk genuinely begins this year, and the first 5 withdrawals decide most of the long-term outcome. The earnings test at 63 turns claim and work into a quiet trap most people never see coming. The Medicare and Cobra bridge collapses at 65, leaving an 18-month gap that costs couples $31,000 to $48,000 if not planned for. And the 4 moves you can layer at 62: spousal coordination, withdrawal sequencing, long-term care underwriting, and the sequence risk buffer, all live behind doors that close at different speeds over the next 36 months. The retirees who treat this year as a deadline rather than a birthday end up with more options, more confidence, and quieter sleep for the next 3 decades. The ones who don't, they spend their 60s chasing fixes for problems they could have prevented in 12 months. Now, I've put together a free retirement checklist built specifically around the 62 to 65 window, with the exact numbers, deadlines, and decision points laid out in order. If you're tackling this on your own, there's a link below to grab the latest version. So let's stop treating 62 like just another birthday and start using it as the deadline that it actually is. If you want to learn more about exactly how my team helps clients implement this in their own plans, click the link below. And here's what I'd be thinking about next: the 2-year cash bucket. How to build it without triggering tax events, without giving up too much growth, and without leaving yourself short on the years where the market is friendly. So check out this video where I break that down step by step. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.